When Sarah Chen bought her dream home in Willowbrook Estates, she never imagined her prize-winning garden would become a battleground. The HOA said her vegetable patch violated community standards and poured cement over her entire backyard while she was at work. But what they didn't know was that Sarah wasn't just a homeowner. She was a geological engineer who understood exactly what that cement was sitting on. And now, 6 months later, their million-dollar homes are cracking apart. One foundation at a time, Sarah Chen had spent 15 years saving for the perfect home in Willowbrook Estates, an upscale planned community known for its manicured lawns and strict aesthetic standards. As a geological engineer specializing in soil stability, she'd done her homework before buying the corner lot on Maple Ridge Drive. The property sat on what geologists call expansive clay soil, beautiful for building when properly managed, but potentially devastating if disturbed incorrectly. Her backyard became her sanctuary. Sarah transformed the space into an award-winning organic garden complete with raised beds, a greenhouse, and a sophisticated drainage system she designed herself. The vegetables fed 3 local food banks, and her composting system had become a model for sustainable living. Neighbors often stopped by to admire her tomatoes and ask for gardening advice. What made Sarah's property special wasn't just the garden, it was her understanding of the land beneath it. During construction of Willowbrook Estates, she'd noticed the developers had cut corners on soil preparation. While her lot had been properly graded and stabilized, the surrounding homes sat on hastily compacted fill dirt over the same expansive clay. She'd even submitted concerns to the city planning office, but they'd been dismissed. The Willowbrook HOA board consisted of 3 couples who'd moved from expensive downtown condos, expecting suburban perfection. Board President Linda Martinez had made it clear from Sarah's first day that agricultural activities didn't fit the community's vision. Vice President Bob Thompson constantly complained about the farm's smell of Sarah's compost bins, despite them being odorless and expertly maintained. Sarah had reviewed every HOA covenant before purchasing. Nowhere did it specifically prohibit vegetable gardens, only stating that landscaping should enhance property values and community aesthetics. Her garden had actually increased surrounding home values by 12% according to recent assessments. But the board seemed determined to find fault. The conflict started small. First came a letter about her non-conforming plant varieties, then complaints about her greenhouse being too industrial looking. Each time, Sarah responded with detailed documentation proving her garden's compliance with both HOA rules and city regulations. She even offered garden tour to help neighbors start their own sustainable landscaping, but the board wasn't interested in compromise. Linda Martinez had grand plans to showcase Willowbrook in a regional community of excellence competition, and Sarah's practical garden didn't fit her vision of pristine, identical lawns stretching in perfect symmetry. What the HOA board didn't realize was that Sarah's garden wasn't just a hobby, it was also an ongoing soil management system. Her deep-rooted plants and carefully designed drainage helped stabilize the problematic clay soil beneath not just her property, but the entire neighborhood. The root systems prevented soil expansion and contraction that could crack foundations, while her drainage channels diverted water away from vulnerable areas. The first real warning sign came during a community barbecue in late summer. Sarah was chatting with her neighbor Helen Foster when she noticed a slight crack in the concrete near Helen's patio. As a geological engineer, Sarah couldn't help but examine it more closely. The hairline fracture ran in a pattern that suggested soil movement beneath the foundation. Helen, when did you first notice this crack? Sarah asked, running her finger along the damaged concrete. Oh, that little thing. It showed up a few weeks ago. My husband thinks it's just normal settling. Sarah knew better. The crack pattern indicated the clay soil was already beginning to shift as moisture levels changed with the seasons. Her garden's root system was helping regulate that moisture. but the surrounding properties lacked the same natural protection as tensions mounted with the HOA board. Sarah began documenting everything: soil moisture levels, foundation measurements, and the gradual shifts she was detecting in neighboring properties. Her engineering background had taught her to prepare for the worst-case scenario. She just never imagined the HOA would hand her the perfect opportunity for the ultimate lesson in soil science. But that night at the barbecue, watching Linda Martinez point dismissively at her tomato plants while standing on a foundation that was already showing stress fractures, Sarah realized the board was about to make a catastrophic mistake. The official notice arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, delivered by certified mail with the kind of legal language designed to intimidate. Violation of community standards, immediate action required, blazed across the top in red letters. Sarah read the document twice, hardly believing what she was seeing. According to the HOA board, her garden constituted agricultural commercial activity and created unsightly conditions inconsistent with residential character. They demanded removal of all vegetable plants, the greenhouse, and composting system within 30 days, or face daily fines of $500. The accusations were absurd. Sarah had never sold a single vegetable. Everything went to food banks or neighbors. Her greenhouse was a beautiful cedar structure that matched her home's trim. The composting bins were hidden behind decorative screening and produced no odor or pest issues. But the most outrageous demand was their insistence on professional landscaping restoration to community standards, meaning expensive sod, generic shrubs, and an automated sprinkler system identical to every other yard. They'd attached photos of acceptable alternatives that looked like suburban cookie-cutter perfection. Sarah immediately requested a hearing, as outlined in the HOA bylaws. She prepared a comprehensive presentation showing how her garden actually enhanced property values, supported local wildlife, and provided community benefits. She brought soil analysis reports, drainage plans, and testimonials from neighbors who loved her garden. The hearing was held in Linda Martinez's living room, with the three-board couples arranged like judges behind a folding table. Sarah presented her case methodically, explaining how native plants and deep-rooted vegetables actually improved soil stability in their clay-heavy neighborhood. She offered to modify anything that genuinely violated community standards. Linda Martinez barely looked at Sarah's documentation. "Mrs. Chen, this isn't about soil science," she said with a dismissive wave. "It's about maintaining the upscale character that makes Willowbrook special. Your garden looks like a farm, and that's not what our residents paid premium prices to live next to." Bob Thompson chimed in with complaints about the constant stream of food bank trucks picking up donations. Apparently, helping feed hungry families was now a traffic concern. The third board member, Janet Wu, actually seemed sympathetic, but remained silent when Sarah looked to her for support. "Look at this neighborhood," Martinez continued, gesturing toward her picture window. "Every lawn is perfectly maintained, every landscape professionally designed. Your vegetable patch ruins the aesthetic continuity we've worked so hard to achieve." Sarah tried one more time to reason with them. "The covenants don't specifically prohibit vegetable gardens, and my property values assessment shows the covenants give us broad authority to maintain community standards." Thompson interrupted. "Your interpretation of the rules doesn't matter. The board's interpretation does. The board's decision was unanimous. The violation stood with an extension to 45 days for removal, but no reduction in fines. If Sarah didn't comply, they threatened liens against her property and potential foreclosure proceedings." Walking home that evening, Sarah felt a mixture of anger and determination. She'd invested 3 years and thousands of dollars creating something beautiful and beneficial. More importantly, her garden was providing crucial soil management for the entire neighborhood, something these newcomers clearly didn't understand. That night, Sarah called her friend Marcus Rodriguez, a civil rights attorney who specialized in HOA disputes. After reviewing the covenants and violation notice, Marcus was incredulous. "They don't have a legal leg to stand on," he told her. "There's nothing in these documents that prohibits vegetable gardens." And demanding identical landscaping. That's aesthetic fascism, not property management. Marcus offered to fight the violation, but legal battles could take years and cost tens of thousands of dollars. Meanwhile, daily fines would accumulate, potentially reaching six-figure amounts before resolution. As Sarah lay awake that night, she thought about the irony of the situation. These board members had moved to Willowbrook for its stability and property values, never realizing that her unsightly garden was literally holding their investments together. The clay soil beneath their homes was like a sleeping giant, stable when managed properly, devastating when disturbed. She made a decision that would change everything. If the board wanted to play hardball, she'd give them exactly what they asked for. But first, she had some very. The harassment escalated quickly after the hearing. Daily drive-bys from board members became routine, with Linda Martinez taking photos of Sarah's garden from different angles, searching for new violations to document. Bob Thompson started timing the food bank pickup trucks, claiming they violated commercial vehicle restrictions despite no such rule existing in the HOA documents. The breaking point came when Sarah received a second violation notice, this time for unauthorized water usage because her drip irrigation system, ALLEGEDLY, exceeded residential landscaping standards. The fine was retroactive for 6 months and totaled $12,000. Sarah knew this was retaliation, pure and simple. Her water usage was actually below neighborhood average thanks to her efficient systems, and she had the utility bills to prove it. But the board had discovered they could weaponize any rule, no matter how loosely interpreted, to pressure her into compliance. The final straw came during the April board meeting, held in the community clubhouse with 20 neighbors in attendance. Sarah had requested time to address the ongoing disputes, hoping community support might convince the board to reconsider. Instead, she walked into an ambush. Linda Martinez had prepared a slideshow titled "Protecting Property Values, the Agricultural Problem," for 15 minutes. She showed before and after photos of similar communities, claiming that farm-like activities inevitably led to property value decline, pest infestations, and undesirable demographic changes. The presentation was filled with misleading statistics and fear-mongering about Sarah's gardens somehow attracting transient populations through food bank activities. Martinez even suggested that vegetable gardens were gateway behaviors that would encourage other residents to violate community standards. "Today it's vegetables," Martinez declared dramatically. "Tomorrow it could be chicken coops, goat pens, or worse. We have to draw the line somewhere, and that line is maintaining the residential character our homeowners invested in." When Sarah finally got to speak, she calmly refuted each claim with actual data. Property values had increased since her garden's establishment. Her integrated pest management eliminated problems rather than creating them. The food bank partnerships reflected community values of service and charity, but the damage was done. Several newer residents who'd never spoken to Sarah before were now eyeing her with suspicion. The board had successfully reframed her community contribution as a selfish threat to their investments. Then, Linda Martinez delivered the ultimatum that would seal their fate. The board has voted to exercise emergency powers under Section 12 of our covenants, she announced. Mrs. Chen's non-compliant landscaping poses immediate risks to community standards and property values. If voluntary compliance isn't achieved within 72 hours, the association will contract professional remediation services to restore the property to acceptable conditions, with all costs assessed to the homeowner. Sarah's blood ran cold. Section 12 was designed for genuine emergencies, abandoned properties, fire hazards, or health violations. Using it for aesthetic disagreements was a massive overreach of authority, but it would take months to challenge legally. "You're threatening to destroy my garden," Sarah asked, her voice steady despite her shock. "We're threatening to restore your property to community standards," Martinez replied smugly. "The choice is yours." The room fell silent. Even some board supporters seemed uncomfortable with the nuclear option Martinez had just deployed. But the president pressed on, clearly enjoying her moment of absolute power. "The remediation company will remove all non-conforming vegetation, structures, and irrigation systems. They'll install proper sod and conventional landscaping that matches community standards. The total cost will be approximately $25,000, plus ongoing fines until compliance is achieved." That night, Sarah called an emergency meeting with Marcus Rodriguez and her closest neighbor, retired teacher Helen Foster, who'd supported Sarah throughout the conflict. They reviewed every legal option, but the harsh reality was unavoidable. The board could act first and face consequences later, while Sarah's garden would be destroyed immediately. "There's got to be something we can do," Helen said, tears in her eyes. She'd been helping Sarah tend the garden for 2 years and knew how much it meant to the community. Marcus shook his head grimly. "Emergency powers are nearly impossible to stop once invoked. By the time we get a restraining order, it'll be too late." Sarah sat quietly, processing the situation. As a geological engineer, she'd learned that sometimes you couldn't prevent a disaster. You could only prepare for it and manage the aftermath. But this wasn't a natural disaster. This was human arrogance and ignorance creating consequences they couldn't possibly understand. "Let them do it," she said finally. "Sarah, no." Helen protested. "Your beautiful garden, let them destroy it," Sarah repeated, her voice gaining strength. "But I'm going to document every single thing they do, every plant they remove, every system they damage, every cubic yard of soil they disturb." She looked at her friends with an expression they'd never seen before, the cold calculation of an engineer who just realized her opponents had handed her the perfect test case. They want to play with forces they don't understand. Fine, but when the consequences hit, I want everyone to know exactly who's responsible. The next morning, Sarah began preparations that would turn their act of destruction into the most expensive geology lesson in Willowbrook's history, while the HOA board celebrated their impending victory. Sarah spent 72 hours conducting the most thorough geological survey of her career. Working late into the night, she documented soil composition, water table levels, and foundation stability measurements throughout Willowbrook Estates with precision that would satisfy any court of law. What she discovered confirmed her worst fears and gave her the ultimate trump card. The entire neighborhood sat on a layer of expansive clay soil known as Montmorillonite, beautiful for development when properly managed, catastrophic when disturbed. During construction, the developers had cut corners on soil stabilization for every property except Sarah's corner lot, which had required special engineering due to its size and position. Sarah's garden wasn't just decorative, it was an intricate soil management system that had been preventing disaster for 3 years. Her deep-rooted plants controlled moisture levels that kept the clay stable. Her drainage channels diverted water away from vulnerable foundation areas. Even her composting system helped maintain optimal soil chemistry. But here's what the board didn't know. Sarah hadn't just bought any house in Willowbrook Estates. She'd purchased the original developer's model home, complete with all engineering documentation and soil reports that revealed the neighborhood's geological vulnerabilities. More importantly, the original development plans showed that her property contained the primary drainage easement for the entire community 20 years earlier. The developers had designed a sophisticated water management system with Sarah's lot as the central collection point. Her garden's drainage channels weren't just for her vegetables. They were carrying runoff from 16 surrounding homes. When the city had approved the development, they'd required this drainage system to prevent exactly the kind of soil instability that could destroy foundations. The final piece of her hidden advantage was even more devastating. Sarah owned not just her lot, but also the underground drainage infrastructure extending beneath her neighbors' properties. The original deed included subsurface rights for water management and soil stabilization systems essential to community development. If the HOA destroyed her garden and damaged the drainage system, they wouldn't just be violating her property rights. They'd be undermining the geological stability that protected every home in Willowbrook. Sarah had one more ace to play. As the original model home, her property had been designed by the development's chief geological consultant, Dr. Sarah Chen, who'd been fresh out of graduate school 20 years ago and working under her maiden name. The HOA was literally threatening to destroy soil management systems designed by the very engineer they were trying to intimidate. The irony was perfect. Linda Martinez and her board had spent months complaining about property values while threatening to destroy the infrastructure that prevented their million-dollar homes from cracking apart. As Sarah reviewed the original construction documents, she found something that made her smile for the first time in weeks. The development's environmental impact statement specifically mentioned the innovative residential, drainage, and soil management systems designed to prevent foundation damage from expansive clay soil movement. The City Planning Office had praised the project as a model for sustainable development on challenging terrain. Every single home in Willowbrook had been built with the assumption that Sarah's property would maintain its sophisticated water management systems indefinitely. The entire neighborhood's geological stability depended on infrastructure that the HOA was about to destroy out of aesthetic pettiness. On the final evening before the HOA's deadline, Sarah sat in her garden one last time, surrounded by the tomatoes and peppers she'd nurtured for 3 years. Marcus Rodriguez sat beside her, reviewing the legal documents that would turn this property dispute into the most expensive lesson in geology the HOA would ever receive. "Are you sure about this?" Marcus asked. "Once they destroy the garden, there's no going back. You'll lose everything you've built here." Sarah looked across the rows of vegetables that had fed hundreds of families, then at the elegant drainage channels that had protected her neighbors' foundations without their knowledge or gratitude. "They've made their choice," she said quietly. "Now they get to live with the consequences. All of them. Tomorrow, the HOA would get exactly what they'd demanded. But they had no idea what they were really asking for. The contractors arrived at 7 a.m. sharp on Friday morning, a 3-man crew with a small excavator, cement mixer, and enough concrete to bury Sarah's garden forever. Linda Martinez stood on the sidewalk supervising like a general commanding a siege, practically glowing with satisfaction. Sarah watched from her kitchen window as they began systematically destroying 3 years of careful work. First went the greenhouse, sledgehammered into splinters. Then the raised beds, crushed under excavator treads. Her award-winning tomato plants were ripped from the soil and tossed into a dumpster like weeds. But Sarah wasn't just watching, she was documenting everything with professional precision. Multiple cameras captured every angle as the crew followed the HOA's instructions to completely eliminate all non-standard landscaping elements and restore the area to uniform residential standards. The most critical moment came when they reached her drainage system. Sarah held her breath as the excavator operator paused, clearly recognizing the sophisticated network of perforated pipes and gravel channels hidden beneath her garden beds. "What about all this drainage stuff?" he called to Linda Martinez. "Looks like it's connected to something bigger. Tear it all out." Martinez responded without hesitation. "We want a clean slate for proper landscaping." Sarah smiled grimly and zoomed in her camera as the excavator's bucket tore through the main drainage line that collected runoff from 16 neighboring homes. 20 years of careful water management was destroyed in 20 minutes. The contractor looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, this drainage system looks pretty important. Maybe we should check with the city before." "I don't pay you to think," Martinez snapped. "I pay you to follow instructions, remove everything, and pour the concrete." Then came the concrete, not just a thin layer, but a solid 4-inch slab covering the entire backyard. The HOA had ordered permanent prevention of future agricultural activities, and the contractors were thorough. They poured concrete over the destroyed drainage system, sealing off the natural water flow that had protected the neighborhood's foundations. By noon, Sarah's garden was gone, replaced by an ugly expanse of gray concrete that looked like a parking lot. Linda Martinez posed for photos beside the slab, sending triumphant texts to the other board members about their successful property standards enforcement. What none of them understood was that they'd just turned Sarah's backyard into a giant concrete dam, blocking the natural drainage that had been channeling water away from their home's foundations for 3 years. Sarah spent the weekend making careful measurements and taking soil samples from around the concrete slab. She documented how water was already beginning to pool against the new barrier instead of flowing into her destroyed drainage system. The spring rains were just 2 weeks away, and the clay soil beneath Willowbrook Estates was about to get very, very wet. The first signs appeared within 10 days. Helen Foster called Sarah in a panic. She'd noticed a hairline crack running along her kitchen wall. Bob Thompson posted on the neighborhood Facebook group asking if anyone else had noticed settling issues in their homes. "Just normal foundation movement." Linda Martinez replied dismissively to the Facebook post. "All houses settle over time. Nothing to worry about." But Sarah knew better. The cracks were appearing in exactly the pattern she'd predicted. Water was accumulating against the concrete barrier, saturating the clay soil beneath neighboring foundations. The expansive clay was beginning to swell and shift, creating pressure that no residential foundation was designed to withstand. By the 3rd week, the cracks were undeniable. Linda Martinez's own house developed a zigzag fissure across the living room wall. 3 other homes showed similar foundation stress. The concrete slab in Sarah's backyard was surrounded by standing water that had nowhere to drain. That's when Sarah played her first card. She sent a certified letter to the HOA board, copying the city planning office and the original development company's insurance carrier. The letter, written on her professional geological consulting letterhead, formally notified them that their destruction of permitted drainage infrastructure had created imminent geological hazards threatening structural integrity of multiple residential properties. The letter included detailed engineering analysis showing how the concrete slab was blocking natural water flow, causing hydrostatic pressure against foundations built on expansive clay soil. She provided before and after soil moisture readings, proving that water was now accumulating where it had previously drained safely away. Most importantly, Sarah's letter revealed the truth the board had never bothered to research. Her property contained the primary drainage easement for the entire community, installed during original construction to prevent exactly the kind of foundation problems now appearing throughout Willowbrook. The HOA's response was swift and predictable. They hired their own engineer to dispute Sarah's findings, but their consultant's report only made things worse. After examining the concrete slab and surrounding properties, he confirmed that significant drainage infrastructure has been damaged or destroyed, creating substantial risk of foundation failure in affected homes. The engineering report estimated repair costs at over $2 million, not just to restore proper drainage, but to address foundation damage already occurring in multiple homes. That's when Linda Martinez made the call that sealed the HOA's fate forever. Instead of admitting their mistake and negotiating repairs, she doubled down. The board voted to sue Sarah for fraudulent misrepresentation and sabotaging community property values through her deliberately misleading engineering claims. They had no idea they were about to learn why you never sue a geological engineer over soil stability issues, especially when she has 20 years of documentation proving she designed the systems you destroyed. Sarah hung up the phone after receiving the lawsuit notice and looked out at the concrete slab that was slowly drowning her neighbor's foundations. The real show was about to begin. The lawsuit Sarah received was 18 pages of legal intimidation, accusing her of everything from fraud to extortion. The HOA's attorney painted her as a manipulative engineer who deliberately concealed drainage problems to trap innocent homeowners in a geological disaster scheme. Sarah's response was a single document that destroyed their entire case, the original development plans from 20 years ago, showing her teenage signature as the assistant geological engineer who designed Willowbrook's drainage system under her maiden name, Sarah Martinez Chen. The HOA had spent 6 months attacking the very person who'd protected their property values before they even moved to the neighborhood, but legal vindication was just the beginning. Mother Nature was about to deliver the real judgment. The spring rains arrived with a vengeance in late April, bringing 3 weeks of steady downpour that would normally have drained harmlessly through Sarah's garden channels. Instead, water pooled against the concrete slab like a lake, creating hydrostatic pressure that pushed directly against neighboring foundations. The first house to show major damage belonged to Bob Thompson, who'd been most vocal about Sarah's farm smell complaints. His basement flooded when foundation cracks allowed water infiltration. The flooding destroyed his home theater system and required emergency foundation reinforcement costing $47,000. Linda Martinez's house was next. The elegant living room where she'd held Sarah's kangaroo court developed a crack so severe that her insurance company declared the home temporarily uninhabitable. She and her family moved into a hotel while structural engineers evaluated whether the foundation could be saved. Within 6 weeks, 11 homes showed significant foundation damage. Property values plummeted as word spread about the geological instability. The Community of Excellence award Martinez had coveted became a distant memory as Willowbrook earned a new reputation as the neighborhood where million-dollar homes cracked apart. The homeowners' panic reached fever pitch when Sarah's engineering report hit the local news. Channel 7's investigative team covered the story as HOA board destroys drainage system, causes foundation crisis. The footage of Sarah's concrete-covered backyard surrounded by cracking homes was devastating. Reporter Amanda Chen interviewed Sarah on camera, standing beside the concrete slab that was destroying the neighborhood. Dr. Chen, you designed this drainage system 20 years ago. Did you warn the HOA about potential consequences? I provided detailed documentation about the drainage infrastructure during their violation proceedings. Sarah replied calmly. They chose to ignore the geological evidence and destroy critical neighborhood infrastructure for aesthetic reasons. The story went viral on social media, with viewers shocked that an HOA would destroy drainage systems during rainy season. Comments poured in from other homeowners sharing similar stories of HOA overreach, but none quite as catastrophic as Willowbrook's self-inflicted geological disaster. That's when Sarah revealed her final trump card. At the emergency HOA meeting called to address the foundation crisis, Sarah stood before 40 terrified neighbors and calmly explained that she could fix everything. Her original drainage system could be restored, the concrete removed, and proper water management reestablished. The neighborhood could be saved, but there was one condition. The HOA board had to resign immediately, and the community had to pay for complete restoration of her garden, plus damages for the 3 months of harassment she'd endured. Linda Martinez, speaking from her hotel room via video call because her house was still uninhabitable, refused. "We're not negotiating with terrorists," she declared. This whole crisis is her fault for not properly maintaining her drainage system. The room erupted. Neighbors who'd stayed silent during Sarah's persecution finally found their voices. "She maintained it perfectly until you destroyed it," shouted Helen Foster. "My foundation is cracked because of your stupidity." Bob Thompson yelled. His earlier HOA loyalty evaporated along with his home's structural integrity. "You ignored 20 years of engineering documentation," called out Janet Wu, the silent board member, who'd finally reached her breaking point. The meeting devolved into chaos as homeowners realized their board's arrogance had cost them hundreds of thousands in damage while attacking the one person who could have prevented it. The final blow came when Janet Wu stood up and resigned on the spot. "I supported this disaster," she said, voice shaking. "Sarah's garden was beautiful and beneficial. We destroyed it out of petty jealousy and ignorance. I can't be part of this anymore." Within a week, Bob Thompson also resigned, leaving Linda Martinez alone on a board governing a community that blamed her for their foundation problems. Her insurance company was threatening to drop coverage. Her own home remained uninhabitable, and she was personally named in 17 lawsuits from neighbors seeking damages. The community's special election to replace the board was a landslide. Sarah was unanimously chosen as the new HOA president, with Helen Foster as vice president and Marcus Rodriguez as the board's legal counsel. Sarah's first official act was to approve emergency drainage restoration. The concrete slab was jackhammered away, revealing the destroyed infrastructure beneath. Working with a team of geological specialists, she designed an even better drainage system that would prevent future foundation problems throughout Willowbrook. The restoration took 2 months and cost the HOA nearly $300,000 in assessments that every homeowner gladly paid to save their properties. Sarah's new garden, planted with both vegetables and decorative elements, became the crown jewel of a community that now understood the difference between aesthetic control and environmental management. Linda Martinez never returned to Willowbrook. Her damaged house sold at a $50,000 loss to a young couple who appreciated having a geological engineer as their HOA president. The same concrete that was meant to bury her garden had instead buried the HOA board that tried to destroy her. Today, Sarah's garden feeds for food banks and serves as a model for sustainable community development. Her story became a case study in geological engineering programs, showing how proper soil management protects both property values and community relationships. The lesson of Willowbrook Estates is simple. Before you attack what you don't understand, take time to learn why it exists. Linda Martinez and her board saw only vegetables where they should have seen infrastructure. They demanded conformity where they needed expertise, but the deeper truth is about power and respect. HOA boards wielding authority without knowledge create the very problems they claim to prevent. Sarah's revenge wasn't planned. It was inevitable, written into the soil beneath their feet from the day they chose destruction over dialogue. The cracked foundations weren't just structural failures. They were the physical manifestation of a community that had lost its foundation of mutual respect and cooperation. 6 months later, Willowbrook Estates won the Regional Sustainable Community Excellence Award for its innovative water management and urban agriculture programs. Sarah accepted the trophy in front of her restored garden, surrounded by neighbors who now competed to grow the best vegetables in the community. Asterisk, have you dealt with an HOA that overstepped their authority? Share your story in the comments. Your experience might help other homeowners facing similar battles. And if you enjoyed this tale of geological justice, hit that subscribe button for more stories where karma and concrete physics combine for the ultimate revenge. Asterisk.